Oh, this is Reverend Don Lewis coming to you from the beautiful metaverse. And this is Midday with Reverend Don, and welcome. And I'm happy to have you here, and we will have a lovely conversation. And whatever platform you may be happening to watch this on, you can type in your questions and comments, and they will appear in my chat room, and we can interact directly, which is what makes this broadcast so much fun for me and hopefully for you. And I love spending this time with you each day and the conversations that we have. And of course, those conversations are or can be driven by where you would like them to go. So if you have any questions you'd like to address or any ideas that you would like to talk about, please put them into the chat room and we will talk about them. In the meantime, I wanted to tell you that we have a new thing at CorellianPublishing.com, a Crystal Web Access booklet, which talks about how to create a Crystal Web Access point and includes two crystals, one to bury, one to carry, one to use for your access point, the other to use as a connection to your access point. And this is available at CorellianPublishing.com for $9.99. And, you know, we're coming up on the 35th anniversary of the Crystal Web on August 8th. And that's quite an accomplishment for any project to be celebrating its 35th anniversary. But the Crystal Web is one of those things that ideally will go on and on and on. And hello to Lori in the hello to Lori in the chat room. Good to see you, Lori. Lori Blackman in the chat room. Hello to Janet in the chat room. Good to see you, Janet. Sometimes I just get talking too fast. We were talking about the Crystal Web the other day. Hello to Anna in the chat room. And it is effectively a worldwide series of synthetic ley lines connecting people all over the world in a giant web of communication and energy exchange. And if you would like to be part of that, this is one way to join. And it's been going on for 35 years, and I'm sure it will still be here many, many years from now. And hello to Bradley in the chat room. Bradley says, I ordered a copy for myself. Happy Friday, Lord Don. I'm glad to hear that, Bradley. Happy Friday to you, too. And we also have soon at the Patreon, not quite, or I mean soon at Corellian Publishing, not quite yet, Reverend Don's Book of Questions, Volume 3. Volume 1 and 2 are already available there. Volume 3 is almost finished. And each of these books is 100 questions from Reverend Don's vlog. And if you've followed my work for a while, you'll know that Reverend Don's vlog was a daily broadcast that I did for 10 years, in which I primarily addressed viewers' questions about metaphysical subjects. And we are turning these into a 4-book set. Again, book 1 and 2 have been available for a while, and book 3 should be up by Monday, if all goes well. Hello to Janet in the chat room. Good to see you, Janet. I've been working on that this morning, and so it's kind of uppermost in my mind. So we may talk a little bit about the vlog. The other thing, of course, is my Patreon at revdonlewis.com. If you would like to support me in my work, hello to Lilith in the chat room. One of the best ways is through Patreon, and we have several tiers of membership where you get different things if you join the Patreon, ranging from the Monday night chat room, which happens every week, to the monthly newsletter, the monthly surprise package, and the monthly seminar. And for the highest tier, a monthly consultation. Hello to Brenda in the chat room. Good to see you, Brenda. And the first newsletter will be coming out presently. The first seminar will be next weekend. And that seminar will be on the subject of magic, what it is and how to do it. And it will be an overview of magical practice. And if you want to be part of that seminar, you can join the Patreon at that level, or you can simply buy a ticket at corellianpublishing.com. It's $25. Um, and it will be the first of many seminars that I will be doing. And these are some of the things that I am putting my attention to. And very soon you'll be hearing me talk more about Psychic Academy, which is the project on the horizon. And again, these are the different things I'm doing. So I thought I would talk a little while about Reverend Don's vlog. And all of the old vlogs are still at Magic TV and various other platforms, but they can be difficult to get through because there are hundreds of them. It was a 10-year project, and so there were a lot of vlogs. That's one of the reasons we've done Reverend Don's Book of Questions, to make those many questions available in written form that you can perhaps more easily find. When we started Reverend Don's vlog in 2010, it was originally going to be more like this broadcast. It was going to be a daily discussion and a view into my life. And for a little while, that's what we did. We focused a little on the creation of the World of Witches Museum during that phase of construction. But we started to find ourselves reaching for subject matter, and people were asking me questions because, of course, teaching is one of my big things, obviously, with witchschool.com and the Corellian tradition. And so I started taking viewers' questions. And after a little while, that became the main thing we were doing on the vlog. There were certainly still other features. There would be interviews and trips to events, and many other things did come across Reverend Don's vlog, but most commonly, it became questions. And they were fascinating questions. Every kind of question you can think of in a metaphysical context, somebody asked. And it was fascinating. It was a wonderful time. So it's been very nostalgic going through the manuscript and seeing all of these questions and remembering this time in my life. And so that has been very enjoyable. And I, of course, am also looking for other projects to work on as I go forward. We're looking at, as I say, we're coming up on the creation of Psychic Academy, and so I'll be putting a lot of emphasis into psychic matters. I'm thinking of putting together a book of psychic exercises. If you've studied the Corellian degree system, you will see the kind of exercises I'm talking about. If you haven't, they're a sequential series of exercises to build psychic ability, to strengthen that muscle, as it were. And I'm hoping to put that together soon. So these are some of the different things I'm doing. I'm also planning to work on some art projects, and we'll be discussing all of them here, I'm sure, as we go forward. One of the things that I'm looking at is the idea of maybe bringing some of our local people into this broadcast. I had been expecting someone today who I was hoping to bring on camera, but that did not quite pan out. But hopefully we can get some of our local people to agree to come on and join our conversation. We also can look at people who aren't local to join our conversations from time to time. And, originally I was going to do an interview on every Thursday. I'd like to get back to that. But I also have the question, is that what you want? And if you're watching right now, I think my question to you is, what would you like me to focus on? Where would you like me to put the emphasis? Right now, we're having lovely conversations. Lilith says, I'm willing to help out. That's wonderful. Thank you, Lilith. I will surely take you up on that. We're having lovely conversations, and we talk about a variety of things, but is that the format that you want? Would you like to see something more focused? Would you like to see more people? how would you like to see things develop? And I ask because, you know, this is a two-way conversation. It's not just a one-way conversation. Even if I am the one on screen at this moment. Um, and I'm curious to see what people would like me to focus on. Also in other projects. Um, for future books, what would you like to see? What kind of things would you like to see develop? And I have a question that I am going to speak to. Oh my! And this is a question through Magic TV, and the comment is made that the Mermaid Parade is here in Coney Island, Brooklyn, New York, this weekend. And if you want to see thousands of people change into mermaids, come on by. And I believe this is in reference to the mermaid vlog. And that's from Sir Eric. We also have from Gabrielle Angelica. Reverend Don, what do you think about all the gray and negative magic that's out there? Even some Wiccans seem to be losing their ethical background, or their ethical backbone. And by the way, I'd love to see your artwork. Thank you, Gabrielle Angelica. What do I think of this? I think that given the state of the world, I think it's kind of natural to see people feeling desperate. Hello, Mary, in the chat room. Good to see you, Mary. And I think that when people feel desperate, they will do more extreme things. Now, we spoke about, I think we spoke only yesterday about the Corellian view of the Wiccan Rede, which is to avoid unprovoked or egregious damage. And I definitely stand by that point of view. It does not prohibit things like self-defense, but there's a lot of popularity for more extreme points of view at this time. But I have to say that there always seemed to be a propensity to more extreme points of view. I always try to take the middle path, for want of a better way to put it. I'm a great believer in the idea of the median, that the virtue lies between the extremes and not at either end, which is not a typical point of view for this day and age. People tend to always be one extreme or the other. So what do I think about it? I don't necessarily think that it's a desirable way to go, but I understand why people are looking at that. And, you know, a lot of people are afraid for their own physical future at this time. And so I cannot blame them for taking more extreme points of view. I do tend to think that most things can be done within that context of avoiding unprovoked or egregious damage. But I definitely am not a believer in the idea that you do nothing when faced with danger. I think that we have a responsibility to meet dangerous times and dangerous situations. And that if we don't do this, we in fact are derelicting that duty, especially if we have families and others who may be looking to us for support. Many years ago, I had a conversation with a very good friend who was a believer in ahisma, and the idea of total non-violence, who made the comment that even if they, whoever they may be, were pounding on the door to take him away, he would not fight back because that would violate his ethics. I remember being horrified by this idea, but there was a distinct difference between my friend and myself. My friend was not in a position where they had any dependents. They had no children. They did not have elderly parents. they were in more of a position where they could make that decision if that's what they wanted to do. I absolutely do not make that decision. If you're pounding on the door to take me away, I'm almost certainly going to fight back. At this age, probably a little less vigorously than then, but um, I'm not a believer in allowing such things to happen, and I think you share responsibility when you allow injustice to happen. Um, I think that it becomes necessary to defend those who are looking to you for defense, and to take what the actions that are necessary. But again, this is entirely possible within a Corellian understanding of the Wiccan Rede, which is to avoid unprovoked or egregious damage. Um, but if you have children, you have to consider them. And this is also a subject that's come up when people bring up free will. It's arguable. Well, free will is a whole conversation in itself. The extent to which we really have free will, because our free will is entirely bounded by circumstance and what is or is not possible in a given circumstance. But there's an idea in many quarters that you must never interfere with someone's free will, and I absolutely do not agree with that as stated. I will agree that all other things being equal, yes, you should not be interfering with people's free will. You should not be imposing your will upon them for the most part. But if you have a child and that child wants to run into a busy street, you should absolutely interfere with their free will. If someone has the free will to shoot up a school or a shopping center, you should absolutely interfere with their free will. They have no right to that free will. They're damaging many other people. To me, if I talk about not interfering with free will, that is not what I mean. What I mean is that when someone is playing by the rules, for want of a better way to put it, you don't interfere with their free will when they're not doing unprovoked or egregious damage. If they are, it's another situation. And you do not have an obligation to let yourself be harmed on the premise of not doing harm. It does not extend to allowing people to do terrible things. And I think it's very important for us to become more cognizant of this than we perhaps have been in the past, as more and more people do terrible things in the world. And we are living in a time of extremity. And I think we need to be conscious of not allowing extremity to overwhelm everything. And there's so many examples one can think of extremity. I'm not going well, I guess the only one I will put in is, for example, the idea of terrorism. Free will is all well and good, but you do not have some unlimited right to blow people up because it's your free will to do so. That is free will that should not be allowed free rein. And I know there are people who feel differently, and they're allowed to be blown up if they want to be. But I do think that if you see someone who is beating up on or robbing someone else, and you're able to stop this, you should. It doesn't matter that it's that person's free will to commit a robbery or to beat someone up. It's not appropriate. On the other hand, if they're not doing any harm, if they're not committing unprovoked or egregious damage, certainly you should not interfere with their free will. But it's not actually as much a blanket statement as people have liked to make it. I think one of the problems we have had in the metaphysical community is people making blanket statements they haven't really thought about. And of a lot of times, if you call them on this sort of blanket statement, they'll backtrack and say, oh, what I really meant was, but it isn't what they said. And it isn't necessarily what people who read their books found, or who took their classes or otherwise interacted with them. And I think we need to examine the things we say. We need to examine the things we teach and be sure that it really is what we mean. I was talking, I think just yesterday about the difference between how I write versus how I speak, particularly when I was doing the vlog. And when I write, I try to make sure I'm covering all eventualities, but when you speak, that's a lot harder to do. And I acknowledge that. But I still try to think of as many eventualities as possible if I'm answering a question where what I say may later be taken as authority. I've not always been equally good at that, but I am very mindful of it, especially entering the next phase of my life. And I think that when you're in a position where people are looking to you as a teacher, that you must do this, because the fact that you did not think of it can influence the people who may be listening to you far more and in far different ways than you anticipate. Now, there are always going to be certain things you don't think about, but like on that subject of free will, do those people who've made the blanket statement that you must never, ever interfere in someone's free will, is that really what they meant, or do they mean what I mean when I say that all things being equal, you should not interfere with people's free will? I think most of them meant what I'm saying, and that they would agree that if you have the chance to prevent someone from harming others, you should, regardless of their free will. But that isn't necessarily what they've said or what others have heard. And I think it's important to be mindful of this. And Bradley in the chat room says, if we have the ability to prevent someone harming another, I think it's important that we do. To stand by and allow harm is to cause harm. And yes, exactly. That's the point that I am making. And I do understand that it's not always possible to prevent someone from doing something bad that way. As I get older, I'm more mindful of the fact that I could not necessarily do what I would have done when I was younger. But I think that we must, particularly as we watch the continuing extremism in the world, we must be mindful of what we can do to prevent harm that others would intentionally cause, what we can do to make a better world in these ways. And people often talk about, they often talk about the 30s and the Nazi era and what they might have done if they'd lived then. But what you might have done if you were living then is always still the right thing to do now, whenever now might be. Now is always the right time to do the right thing. And just letting people do whatever they want in a blanket sense is not the right thing. I am a believer in the idea that that we have a social contract that we must maintain. And yes, that social contract can be overdone. But I'm not a believer in the idea of anarchy that I've known many people who thought was great. Oh, if we had no government at all, wouldn't it be better? And the truth is, if we had no government at all, it would just mean the strongest people would beat up the weakest people and take whatever they had. We know that because there have been times when there was no government at all, and that's exactly what happens. And any fantasy that everyone's going to get along and make a beautiful, idealistic world has been disproven again and again and again and again. What we can do is work together to make the best social contract that we can make, and then abide by that. And Is our current social contract the best that it can be? Well, that will never be true. It can always be better, and we must always work to make it better. But it's certainly better than not having one. Um, and this is regardless of whether we are speaking of society as a whole or the agreements of our relationships. It is it's always necessary to, I think, have that aspect of social contract. And hello to Brian in the chat room. Good to see you, Brian. Brian says, "Happy Friday." It is Friday. That means I will not be back until Monday, um, at least on this particular format. And that's where we're at. Um, but I hope that you have enjoyed this conversation. I see that we're coming to the end of our half hour. And I believe that that these conversations often touch on very important things. And it's interesting to me to see where they go from where they start. Because I had no intention of discussing this subject today, but here we are. And Mary says, "I always love these conversations." Thank you, Mary. I love these conversations too. I love all of you. I thank you for joining me. You add a lot to my life, and I appreciate it. So let us have our prayer. And Divine Mother Goddess, Divine Father God, beloved ancestors, we ask you to help us to see the good connections in our life to people, to places, to events, and help us to cherish and nurture the good, and help us to learn what can be learned from the bad and move on. Help us to build our lives around beauty and joy and love, even as we aspire to do. Divine Mother Goddess, Divine Father God, beloved ancestors, we thank you for your presence now and always. We know you are always with us. But from respect, we thank you for being here. And until next time, may you blessed be. And I thank you for being here. Bradley says, "This is my favorite part of weekdays." Thank you, Bradley. That's very kind of you. And it's my favorite part as well. I'll look forward to seeing you on Monday. And I love you all. Until next time, may you blessed be.